Welcome back everybody to the Bread and Burr YouTube channel. We've got a lot to cover in a short time to do it, so let's get to work. So if you think what we've done up until now is redneck, this is gonna take the cake. So if you've watched any of my most recent videos, you'd see that I bought a house and it didn't go as planned. We had to redo the whole place. I'm gonna spare that story, but basically that's why I haven't been working on cars as much. James had a baby, Dan's been busy. It's been tough to work on this car. So we're back to work on it, which is good. And we're working pretty hard on it. It's in a weird state where the car is in good shape, but the spares are kind of in a weird like limbo state between being okay and not okay. So what I'm going to do right now is just kind of explain what I'm doing out here, the state of the car, and then like exactly what I'm at the shop to do right now. And then we'll kind of bleed over into what I've got going on at my house with this car. So let's get to explaining. I'm going to try to keep this brief. So this car raced Mid-Ohio last September. It's been sitting since, and it's really unfortunate, but I didn't get to finish that race because the video was 36 hours of footage. We have a camera in the front of the car. Well, we have one forward facing camera here and one rearward facing camera there. So when you've got 8 hours of video a piece over 2 days, that's 1632, right? So 32 hours of footage to go through is a lot. And to try and summarize that, it's not like drag racing where you make a quick video and it's exciting for 13 seconds. I've got to figure out how to make 32 hours of racing exciting. And you know, it's mundane, but the build is, you know, what we're here for. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do the races better. But basically, we raced this car at Mid-Ohio, and it did great. We got 5th and 3rd in class, so it did really well, and our strategy is garbage. So we're working on that this year. But what happened was in practice, we ended up blowing up the engine I built in the videos before Mid-Ohio, and we had to put this one in it. So this is our spare. We built this engine in the trailer, in the rain, at 1 a.m. at Mid-Ohio in 2020, and it is running like a top. We're just gonna let it roll because it's still making good power, it's running fine. We're doing well with this one. So the engine that I built last year, I took it to the house and I looked at it, and we'll go over what happened to it later, but it had cracked pistons, so I'll cover that when I get back to the house tonight. But that's why this engine's in here, and we need a spare. So what I'm doing right now is building the engine at my house to have a spare, so that way in case this one does expire, we have one to put back in it. I have to put factory pistons back in that thing, and I didn't want to really go through this till we got back to the house. I can show you guys this and explain why, but we have to use factory pistons per the Champ Car rules, which really sucks. We can't use forged. Otherwise, we would have been swapping in this engine right here that we bought from Luke. I don't know exactly the specifics on it, but I know it's basically got a crank, rods, pistons, cam, springs, retainers, and this incredible turbo and exhaust manifold on it. So this is a KLM manifold, and this is a Garrett, I think Gen 3 ball bearing, triple ball bearing, wicked turbo. It's good for like 450 horse, but it should spool immediately. So I'm wondering if we can't get this on this engine, get this all suited up to basically just do a long block swap, where if we go to AER, which is a a faster racing series, we can use the forged internal engine, because as far as I know, James would know better, there's not a lot of rules on what you can have in your engine there. So what we could do is make it where we just do a long block swap between races and just leave that turbo and maybe that intake. I'm not sure about the rules on that. Or maybe we just use the stock intake and then just have a different tune for the long blocks. That transmission there is a carbon synchro, fully built EX gear set, and an LSD, I believe it's an M factory LSD in that thing. So we're gonna use that transmission as well. But unfortunately, we can't put that engine in and race. We're gonna use one of these, which isn't unfortunate. These are good engines. It's amazing how long we've been able to make stock engines last, but we're out of points. We don't really have any points to spare on this car. And once you hit 500 points, you start starting laps down. So that's how they keep it competitive. So we're good with the turbo kit. We can do whatever we want. Their ideals there, we just, more power means less reliability. So they're kind of letting you regulate yourself there. Anyway, what we're here to do today, this is a long story, but our brake ducts are, they're questionable. I think they work, but so I think they work, but I'm going to show them to you now, just kind of explain what's going on with them. So these are our old brake ducts here, and we have just like an aircraft 2-inch fitting right here and a hole cut in our dust shield, which you can't really see, but it's in there. Then it has to run back here, and then it has to go past the crank pulley, and then it has to go up to a 2-inch to 3-inch adapter through 1 tight kink, 2 tight kinks, 3 bends, 4 bends, 5 bends to the rotor. So we're not really sure about that. So the problem is I wanted to make something better. So what I started doing is I got an app called Polycam. It's a paid app, I think it's $60, and I can take 3D scans of things. And I use this 3D scan to put it into another low-cost CAD software called Shaper 3D. And it's not the most amazing CAD app there is, but it works really well. It's surprisingly, it works better every time I use it. But anyway, I used it to put together these brake ducts, and what I'm here to do today is try to fit them and see if they fit. I'm having some issues with it, and I've got a model here to kind of explain why, but it's very close, and I think it's going to work. Go away. And I need to test fit it on the car because as the wheel articulates, James is putting rack limiters in this thing, but as the wheel articulates, it's getting too close to the damper. There's knuckles on this side. I can't necessarily get all the way up in here, but this gap between the caliper piston and the damper gets really tight, and to go below it means that I have to come all the way through here to come out the bottom, and then that just puts it in more of a pinch point. Or I can come out on top and we can just finagle the brake line a different route. So I'm trying to work with that and figure this out. But you know, when you look at this from just a general standpoint, you think, wow, it's super easy, no big deal. So I printed an original duct out of just some junk PLA I had laying around, and I used that 3D printed duct to check on this thing, and it worked pretty well, but its cross-sectional surface area was trash all the way through. It was a really tight choke point, and then it got bigger again. So I tried to mitigate that. So then I figured that out, and then, you know, now I'm in a position where the duct is in a different spot, and I'm just trying to find an iteration I can work with and build on, because the duct I have now is completely different from the one I made initially. So this is the one I have now. It's a mess, right? So I had to break this one because I forgot to bring the knuckle I was testing and scanning. So I broke the end of it off, but basically this thing sits like this, kind of like in that rotor cavity with no dust shield, right? And then it opens up on the end. Don't mind I stopped the print right there because I didn't need this piece for this test piece. But basically, that's the feed right into the mouth of the rotor. And then out of the front of this one ends early because it's just a test piece. I needed to check mounting between here and here. But this continues and looks like this. And then this is let's start with this one. This is the 2-inch pipe that will fit our current duct, which is currently jammed up in behind the turbo to get out of my way. Looks something like that, right? Aims towards the car, dodges the brake line and everything. There's also the big bore, this guy, which is 3-inch, and I think we're gonna end up using this one. Does this go this way or this way? No, it goes this way. I agree. So what I'm gonna do is glue that on there, slap this knuckle back on the car, put the tire on it, and try to see if this thing clears the caliper and the damper housing. So that's what we're gonna do now. All right, so initial test here. First of all, this doesn't clear the brake line because the brake line does actually angle backwards. I thought it was just a flex line, but there's actually a hard line at an angle in here. So it doesn't even clear the brake line. So even if I get it out of the way, it's still too close. So that is something that he's taken into consideration. But on top of that, there's another issue. Full lock, that is not even close to being able to work. So my options here are go up higher and have to like either go over the brake line, which isn't gonna work, or go under it, kind of more up here, or come out down here, kind of in this like area of the damper fork, but on top of that issue. But then that leads to having to go down between the rotor and drive shaft right there. So like I said, this is not as easy as it seems. I have another option I don't really want to do. If this brake line is held where it belongs right there, there's a potential I could come out right here, go up and over within the wheel cavity, and then go over the brake line right here, and then come around under the frame. The most logical option is to come in the back here, because this is the only intake to the rotor right here. Oh, there's another one down here. Going underneath isn't really much of an option because the lower arm's too tight. And even if I did go under, this duct would have to articulate with the knuckle. However, I could make a fixed duct. I could make a fixed duct on the. I could make a fixed duct on the car and have a flex line coming from here to wherever the fixed duct is, like maybe up here, which is another option, and would be much less 3D printed material. But the only thing you gotta worry about there is this relief right there is for the drive shaft. So you'd have to either go under it or way up and over it like right here, but then you'd have to clear the damper and everything. That's a whole new set of considerations. So like I said, this is not as simple as it seems. It's actually quite complex, at least to do it properly. There's a couple of options here that I've discovered. I'm gonna do a little bit more thinking. Oh, I'm stressed. So here's another little tidbit that I just kind of thought of. When we're racing, we never turn the wheel more than 180 degrees, which is not a lot of steering angle. The tightest corner we go through is a left-hander at NCM, and we turn the wheel just under half turn. So 180 degrees to be safe. The thing that sucks about designing these ducts is I'm basically designing them to be driven around in the pit and loaded on the trailer, which is a huge bummer. I've got a couple of options like putting a scoop underneath the car and stuff, but even that is challenging. So I don't know. I gotta figure something out because the duct I brought out here wasn't even close. Okay, so I have a scam that I think will work with the tightest area at full lock with the suspension at full compression. So I'm gonna go refine the duct I just threw in the trash to try to come down through that area. Hopefully that will get us where we need to go. This is not easy. None of this is easy. I know there's a couple keyboard warriors that will come in here saying, I'll just do this. It is not that easy. So we're gonna give this a try. Let's go home now, see what we got going on there. All right, so we are back at my house now. As you can see, my garage is unfinished. This was all covered in red panel board, so I tore it down, and now it's equally depressing but brighter. So anyway, got the engine torn down. Here's what we found. Long story short, number 2, this is 1, 2, 3, and 4, but number 2 had a loss of compression. For those of the trained eye, you can already see what happened, but we'll start with number 1. Number 1 had a cracked compression ring. Number 2 compression ring right there. You see that broken? So that probably happened during assembly. I'm willing to admit that. That sucks, but it had good compression, and those are good male rings. Mahle, M-A-H-L-E, male, whatever. So those are good rings, but this cylinder was doing okay. This one had a loss of compression because if you can see, there is a big crack right there in that ringland. The ringland is folded down but not smashed, and this ring still moves. So kudos to the rings, the pistons, and the VR1 racing oil that we use. It's cracked there as well, and that crack goes all the way to the wrist pin. This one tried to. It continues through into the bottom of the piston, so we were probably not far from shattering that. Oh, let's see here. This one, number 3, had a crack right there, kind of in the same place, but only on that side. There's no crack over here, but you can see where the wear on that piston was pretty severe as it started to kind of collapse that ringland. Number 4, exact same story. So what we have attributed this to is the fact that we had this engine machined. So we had the head surface and the block surface machined, and we believe that raised the effective compression ratio. And when that happened, we didn't pull any timing from the tune. And these cars have a distributor, so there's the ability for that thing to not be where it needs to be. The cam crank and TDC position sensors are in that thing, and they're not super accurate. So we're thinking that this was a spark caused issue. Reason we believe that is because we swapped the long block. Everything else was the same with the other engine that was in the car I showed you earlier, and it ran the whole race fine. So what we're going to do for this engine moving forward is just pull a little bit of timing. So what we have here is 4 cracked pistons in need of replacement. We get on Rock Auto and order their finest cast pistons. These are ITMs. They say P2P standard on them. That's what we need. They're actually a pretty nice little piece. Okay, come with wrist pins and everything. So wrist pins, rings, the only thing we got to reuse is those tiny little rods. And before anybody crucifies me, we cannot use forged pistons. We have a set of brand new CP forged pistons. We can't use them in this series. We have to use cast pistons. So if I need to repeat that, we have to use OE equivalent pistons. So we got these, we got rings, we got a new fuel pump in the car, I told you that, so I think we got this pretty well covered. So what I'm gonna do from here is I'm gonna skip the boring part. I'm gonna get these wrist pins out and I'm gonna get these pistons changed. I'm gonna redesign that brake duct, and then we'll come back for the next video, which will be us working on the car again, probably putting this engine back together, seeing what James has got going on with the seat, the harness, Hans device, and the wheel bearings. And then we'll work on the brake ducts on the car. So with that being said, I'm sorry for the hiatus, but I'm glad to be back. And I hope that, you know, my house keep coming together so I can work out here a little more effectively. This is a little chaotic right now, but thanks for stopping by, guys. I appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.